for us to actually start this stream up. Oh, it looks like it's already up. That was fast. Let's go ahead and tell the world. Hurrah! Streaming game dev gonna build faces. Paste. And then over here, same deal. All right, so let's see. I imported the faces and I played around a little bit with getting them to show up properly in game view. Right now it's just a generic slapdash texture that I put together for the sake of having a texture. There are a whole bunch of mistakes that I made, and I'm not really great at skin textures. But for the sake of testing, we've got two options. One option is I can continue to work on textures, and the other option is that I can start to work on the actual face stuff. Now, I do want to work on textures in public, but I only want to do it when I've got a couple of people watching the stream, because the whole point there would be to have some people who were actually looking, you know, who could say, hey, that doesn't look right, or that looks wrong in this particular way. But you know what, let's go ahead and switch over into ZBrush. I've got a boot ZBrush, so objection! Give me a moment to pop it up. Grind, grind, grind. Grind, 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 grind. Grind, 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 grind. Grind. ZBrush opens so slowly. Oh, you know what? It might be that this computer needs a reboot. No, I'm not having the issue that I sometimes have, so I think it's just being slow. Did it not open? Come on. Did I accidentally close it when I hit escape? This is why you come to my streams, right? To look at Phoenix Wright pointing his finger. There we go. Jeez, that took forever. So the real problem I've got with ZBrush is that every single time I do anything, I have to remember to carefully tell it to not save the undo history. Every single time. It always saves the undo history. That doesn't permanently change the preferences. Why doesn't that change the preferences? So if you know where the actual setting is hidden rather than the one that doesn't work, let me know. So this is just the head, and I've got to remember how to use this. Hold on. There we go. I don't generally have a mic in front of me. Hold on, I have to make loud mic noises while I fix this stuff up, and then pull in my normal tool set. Grind, 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 grind. Ooh, I bet that was loud. Sorry about that. All right, so now we've gotten set up for ZBrushing, because I'm ZBrushing. So there's a couple of components that I need to have this work out. I just did a generic pink person when I was here last, but what I actually need to do is, in addition to making a better texture in terms of skin for various skin tones, I also need to, hold on, let me adjust this mic again. Squeak, there we go. I also need to set this up so that it has the right texture for bump maps. So if we take a look, excuse me, I got hiccups now. You can see how this is a very, very aggressive bump map. I don't want it that aggressive. So what we're going to do is we're going to redo the bump mapping so that it isn't this aggressive, and that's going to involve doing stuff and then not saving it. We're just going to add in one more subdivision level because this is a little bit, it's something that we need to do. And then we're going to set up a texture that is a good skin texture. And the best way to do that is to have it be a, is it not texture? Fill layer. No, that's not it. I broke it. Try that again. Sorry, I'm trying to remember how to do this. Is it alpha? Oh, it's alpha. There it is. So basically, we need to make a texture for the alpha, and it's going to have to be... Oh, it's not make... It's... I did this yesterday. How did I do it? there is a way to tell it to create a noise texture. It was super easy. I did it yesterday and it worked fine. Oh my gosh, I feel stupid because I was so confident I'd just be able to do it again. And guess what? I forgot how. So we'll look it up. ZBrush noise texture brush. Noise brushes. You're a video. Customized noise brushes. No, this isn't like a customized noise brush. This is just the ability to create a noise texture. Applying surface noise to your model. In the tool palette, open up the surface menu and click on the noise button. Tool. Are you high? This is not how I did it before, and there's no surface menu. Great. The rest of this is how I did it, but I did it by right-clicking on something, and then it just worked. It just popped up down here. There was an option to create a noise texture. I don't know why it's not here anymore. Well, that royally screws up my my interest in making this work out because I can't do it the way I was going to do it. Oh, here it is. Make texture. No. I already clicked on that and it didn't work. God damn it. Here it is, the exact same thing that didn't work last time. Is it make 3D? No, that's obviously not it. Wow, I don't know what that did, but it broke it. Okay, that was weird. I swear I didn't have any problem with this yesterday. I don't know why. It was so easy that I just assumed I'd be able to do it again. I'm brilliant like that, as you can tell. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pick a bristly brush. It doesn't really matter which one. This one. This one. And we're going to just repaint some of this just a little bit because I noticed that it didn't feel right in the window. So there is a big problem when you are trying to do, when you're trying to set up a skin texture. And that is that the skin material here in ZBrush, the skin shader, and the various shaders that you use in Unity are not the same. One big indication of that, if I pop over into Unity, this is the skin in Unity, and you can already see how it's a little bit different. But if I were to take this skin and just bring it all the way down to just total black, everything is completely black, you can see how this is fairly black, but that's because I tweaked the hell out of it. When you do this normally, it actually comes out to a neutral gray, because the skin shader I'm using absorbs the ambient light that you set up in the scene so absurdly well that every single kind of skin just glows. So I was using like this kind of incredibly dark brown color as a base skin tone for Caucasian skin. It was ridiculous. And because of that, it's difficult to know what's going to look good here in Unity and what's going to look good here in ZBrush. So what I've got here is I painted this up, and you're actually looking at the same texture in both spaces. But you can see how the lips are green, and we've got this kind of damaged purpley look over here. And that's not what I see in ZBrush. You can see how the lips are clearly pink in ZBrush, and the cheeks are certainly not purple. So the question is, what's going on? And the answer is, I don't know. But I think it's because the shader that we're using, which is the pre-integrated skin shader, has a setup where it attempts to make skin look more realistic. And it appears to be adding in blues and grays in areas I'm not expecting. And I'm not sure where those are coming from. It's hard for me to tell. If I were to create a duplicate of this head, like say this one I happen to have right here 2 inches to the side, I can add this in to the same head texture. There it is. You can see that it's a little bit different. First off, it's not nearly as dark because it's faking ambient light again. But one of the things, oh, it's also got the wrong, just grab this and drop it in. Yeah, we don't want it to be that severe though. So one of the things you can see right away is that this over here, even though it's the exact same albedo map, it looks dramatically different. Not only is it a different tone of color, it's also it's not just darker. It's got strange things to it that aren't in the texture map that I supplied. And this makes it difficult for me to want to use the pre-integrated skin shader. There's something that I don't understand or that I'm misunderstanding about how it's supposed to work, because this pre-integrated skin shader is making my faces strange colors, and it's continually doing both the values and the colors of the face, and it's just so strange. So, for example, if I reduce this F0 down to nothing, we actually have the color balance that we'd like. It's not the right value level, but it's pink, it's peach. This is what I was expecting to see. But if I leave it down at F0, then what that means is that I will never be able to get any highlights on the skin. The glossiness doesn't do jack. The bumpiness doesn't do jack. That only works when I've got this F0 turned up. But when I turn the F0 up, it turns the skin gray and purple. So just so you're aware, this is how you would adjust the exact kind of texture of the skin in terms of, how wet it is and all that sort of things. And it's fine in theory, but in practice, it turns the skin this weird color. And I don't really know what to do about that. If you have any ideas what to do about that, let me know. I can turn the ambient lighting back on, and you can see how it looks when it's sucking in ridiculous amounts of ambient lighting. Because that was down here. Yeah, so you can see when we turn the ambient lighting back on, it actually doesn't look too bad. So maybe it's built specifically to have this ambient lighting turned on. And it might be, so it might simply be that the skybox color with the intensity multiple at 0, maybe it was multiplying by the negative of the skybox color or something. If we change it over to just a flat color, this is how it looks with a gray color, as you can see. It's interesting because it's no longer an intensity value. There it is. There's the intensity value. Yeah, so I don't think that's going to work. Let's switch it back to skybox for now. So it looks like if I turn the ambient light up, I can get it to look relatively decent. The bump map is way too deep, which is what I was talking about right at the beginning. But when I turn that ambient light up, it stops looking weird and purple. That's such a strange thing. I don't understand it. Here's the problem. Oh, I guess that's not too bad. I don't know. Well, we'll continue on in this way. I don't really know what the best approach here is. I'd like to have a more neutral skin tone, so that's what I'm going to try and paint now. Unfortunately, for everybody who's watching, I am not an expert at skin tones, and I don't actually know what I'm doing. So what we're going to do, that was the wrong brush. We're going to use the paintbrush, and also we are going to switch over here, and then we're going to want to turn on the texture. This texture is something I really want to get work. I don't know if I was hallucinating or what. We're not going to want to have it at 6. That's a little bit too high. It has poly paint layers. Oh, I put the freckles in a layer. That's right. And I can get deleted. It doesn't matter. So as you can see, this kind of neutral tone is darker than what I was using before. But it's not like pitch black or anything. It's a kind of a neutral flesh tone. And it looks like ZBrush is being friendly as usual. There we are. But the question is, how do you make this look lifelike? Because if it's just like this, then it's way too flat and it doesn't really feel lifelike. And plus, I think it's a little too orange. If I were to bring it a little bit yellower and back it up just a touch this way. Nope, that's too gray. That's probably a little bit better. See, I already know that this is going to get punched into the reds by the skin shader that I'm using if I choose to use that skin shader, because it adds red. And therefore I have to go just a little bit sallow on these, I think, if I want it to work out. But what I do want to do is I want to use a redder color for some of the darker regions, and we're just going to dust them. Now, this isn't a situation where I'm painting in the ambient occlusion. That's actually baked separately. This is me trying to change the underlying skin tone. And the problem is that there are lots of videos on how to do that for pale people. And being a pale person, I can just look in a mirror. But it's hard to figure out how to do it for anybody who is, you know, a more moderate dark, or even a very dark character. They just don't exist. So I'm kind of guessing as to where these regions go. And I'm just going to assume that they're the same basic regions, but they're going to be played way down because of the darkness of the pigment. But what I can do is use just darkening rather than value changes. I still use value changes, but if I bring in some darkness, I think it'll probably work out okay. I'm not really sure. If you know anything about skin painting, feel free to let me know. You can see that my texture here is coming in as really kind of zombie-ish due to the speckled nature of this brush. And I could stop using the speckled brush, but I actually want that speckled feeling, and I can always, you know, blunt it out later with a blend. Because we're going to be adding in a little bit of speckle ourselves later on, so we're just going to kind of brush it away here and leave it as a speckly sort of situation. But this might not be the right tone. It looks kind of purple, don't you think? So it's hard for me to tell what's going to work and what's not. What we're going to do now is we're going to go nice and broad on this, bring the RGB value way down. I don't actually know what I'm doing, so don't assume that this is how you're supposed to do it, because I am guessing, and my undo button isn't working. There we are. Basically, I'm just going to add a little bit of texture, nothing that you should be able to really notice, but just enough to make it so that it feels a little bit good. And then what we'll do is we'll use the smooth brush to try and weave away these areas. The problem is that the density of this mesh is so high that the smoothing is barely noticeable, even at maximum RGB intensity. And that's why this is a little bit difficult to do when you've got too many layers of your geometry. If we bring this down to maybe layer 3 and smooth it away, it smooths away much faster, you can see. So, you know, that's one of the things about different layers. For some reason, the smooth brush isn't effective at higher values. So let's just go ahead. I don't think that this red is going to end up being the color I want. I think it's too red. I think I need something that's got more of a neutral value, but we're trying to give a little bit of this kind of look at the very least. Let's go ahead and just lighten up those lips. They look like they've been painted on. That might work. And then we'll pull this red in for the ears, just like a subtle tone. Less subtle than that, though. Now, there is a lot of me wants to go in and start to paint in like blues and stuff, but the problem is that I don't know how this is going to look in the first place. So we're just going to put in just a little bit of speckle down here for a couple of reasons. It's going to help us to figure out what it's going to look like, and it's also going to allow us to see what sort of other values we might consider using when we're painting this thing. So let's go in for a light value and just spray it in down here so that when we're viewing it, it's not going to interfere with our visual on the face, but we'll be able to see how it looks on skin. And that'll be important to tell us what sort of values we want. But this same sort of lighter gray value is often on the face. The problem is that if I lighten this face up very much, it's not going to have the dark tone, the dark neutral tone that I want. We're just going to, I'll lighten it up a little bit here to play down a little bit of that overwhelming purpleness. Let's try it. Let's go ahead and see how that looks. What we're going to do is we are going to use Multimap Exporter on the texture from Polypaint. And we're just going to tell it to go, do its thing. It's all good. And it's going to paint that out for us. And then we're going to go back over into Unity and take a look at how it looks. So the new one is here. Just pop it in. It should be darker. Yeah, there it is. It's darker. And if we use it with the normal map, it looks like that. And you can see this radical amount of difference because that barely looks any darker. The Unity version only looks a tiny bit darker than the first one I made, even though it is a fairly dark color in terms of, you know, it's halfway down the value scale. It's not at all a gentle change from what it was. But if we look at it in terms of how it looks, aside from the normal map issues that we're having with this because it's too choppy, aside from that, does that look right? No, it looks sallow. It looks... I may have overdone the idea that it was going to be reddened because it doesn't look like it got reddened at all. It looks fine over here, though. So once again, what we're seeing here is the problem I was having. It doesn't play well with darker skin tones. It lightens them up in the weirdest way. And I can't get anything that is even vaguely dark to look right. And this is something that's a no-go for me. I'm not going to have just a space... I'm not going to have all my space missions filled with just pale people. That's not acceptable. So if I bring the intensity multiple down to 0... It definitely looks burned at that point. If I bring it up to 1, I actually don't know what it is by default. Maybe... No, not 4. Maybe 1 is the default. That's actually pretty close to how I imagined it would look. Except it's a little bit sallow. It's not quite as red as I thought it was going to be. So let's go ahead and brush it up with some redder colors to give it a little bit of liveliness. And we're just going to half-ass it, splat it on, see how it looks, try it again. Because the problem is, what are the colors we're using? How do they work? Anyway, we're going to be focused mostly on value changes for the parts of the face that have value changes in them. As I said, when it's a light-skinned person, you get a lot of extra reds, but I don't think that's going to be the case for these kinds of characters. And once again, I'm just kind of half-assing it, just trying to figure out what it's going to end up looking like. Now, if we're going to be doing it normally, if you were doing a lighter-skinned character, you'd gray this area up some. But I'm not sure that that makes sense in this case. Certainly not that gray. Let's go ahead and gray it up a little bit. And then we'll just bring in a little bit of gray up here too, but it needs to be... that's too gray. All right, now let's smooth this thing out some so that it's a little bit less obnoxious. There are times when we're going to want that really aggressive sort of feel, but not this time. And you can see how I'm leaving all sorts of streaks and dents, and I don't know whether that's going to be good or bad in the long run, but it's something that's pretty easy for me to do. I can fix it or not fix it as I need. So if we pop back over into Unity, and we assign this new value, here it is on the left, and here it is on the right. Oh, it's yellow. I swear I made it... Didn't I make it substantially redder? Why is it yellower? Oh, I'm not assigning it to the correct mesh, or the correct material. I was wondering. It's like, that didn't seem to be changed at all. It was a problem with how it was scrolling. There we are. So that's... Apparently the happy medium is 1/4 millimeter. I don't know how realistic this looks aside from the normal map. If you have any idea if that looks good or bad, let me know. Neither of them look terribly moderate dark. They both look kind of tan. So that's a little bit surprising to me, but this was the problem I was having before. If I take this all the way down into pitch black mode, it's not too bad, but really I was thinking that it would be more of a, a color like maybe this tone, because that's roughly the actual value that I plugged in terms of the amount of darkness. Now, the other thing worth noting is that the added color regions don't seem to be playing very well here. They play fine over here, but they're not great. I could punch them up a lot further and they'd still work great over here. Over here, they get lost in what must be an intensity map for glossiness. Not sure. Yeah, this F-Zero is required to make this skin, have a realistic sheen, but it makes the skin gray. I think what it's doing is it's adding metallicity, and metallicity will reflect the color of the world around you. And the problem is that the world around us is that default Unity blue. So if we were to pull open the window again, like so, we can change it to a different skybox, or we can even change it to a color. Now the problem is that this color is, it doesn't actually get set until you exit. Okay, so I can't tell. Yeah, it must be getting set. So the question is, if I were to make this ambient color for the reflections a red color, that's way too bright. Oh, so -2 is not black. That's interesting. So if I bring it down to like -2 here, and then I were to change this color around, you can see how it does change what color the faces are. And I think the problem is that we were using a very, very blue color, something along the lines of this. And what that's giving us is a skin tone that gets bluer as we drive up the F-Zero intensity here. And because of that, it wasn't really feeling like skin after that. So if we were to bring it up into more of a reddish neutral color, I'm not sure. That might be too red. Oh, it went back up to 0. That's the problem. That's not very nice. So if we do that, and then we were to bring up the F-Zero intensity, it still goes gray. I've told it to reflect a blue, or red rather than a blue, and it didn't change it. So maybe it's trying to actually reflect the light map. Yeah, let's go ahead and just make that. I can't. I actually don't want it to be anything. I don't want it to have any reflection at all. No, that might have actually. I don't know. I don't know how to do this lighting shit, and lighting is so important for skin. It's like, what am I doing? I don't know. I don't have any idea how to do this. And unfortunately, it doesn't appear that this is a very interesting thing to watch. Either way, this is a decent enough neutral. Let's go ahead and put away the art tools. And I'll try and figure out what the heck I was doing before that actually worked. Bring it back. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to work on the tools we need to make this character into 10,000 characters. So if we take a look at the female generic obj, this is the head. I don't know why it's named female generic obj, but you can see how it's got a bunch of blend shapes to it. And as we apply these blend shapes, we get different sorts of values out of it. See? And we can also modify the bone armature. It's built specifically to allow us to scale these bones to give us different sorts of faces. If you were around when I developed this tech, you already know how it's working, but this is missing a couple of things that we're going to need in terms of expressions and stuff like that. And the question is whether or not we went with expressions as shape keys or as bones. And it's pretty clear we went with them as shape keys, and I just never made the shape keys because these bones are split right across the middle of the mouth. And that means that there is no way to have the bones animate the mouth in any sort of decent way. They're always going to get skewed as the two parts of the head end up separating. So what we're going to want to do is just go ahead and make those as shape keys. Let's go ahead and do exactly that. While we're here, we might as well rename the mesh. So we'll switch over from this mode into solid. Boop. And we're going to want to select the head here and then rename it into head. Exciting stuff, I know. And that's going to be enough to do some of the work we needed. Here, there are a couple of bones that actually do the work for a couple of facial animations. We've got a jaw that opens and closes. That's important. And we've also got an eye that animates using this bone here, and that's important too. But the rest of the facial animations are all going to be shape keys. So for that to happen, what we're going to need to do, oh, that's not even the right texture. That's the old make human texture. Doesn't matter. What we're going to need to do is we're going to have to go over into shape keys, which is where? Oh, we're not in the right object. There it is. You can see there's a lot of S's here. S stands for shape, and we're going to have different prefixes for different kinds of keys. So we're going to use E for emotional keys. Now, one of the issues we've got is that the mouth is going to have a couple of different visual variants, as you can see. So when we're actually creating the expressions, we're going to have to be careful to create expressions that either work for every kind of lip or create expressions where there are also adjusts. So we're going to go ahead and just start by trying to create an expression, and then we'll create adjusts if we need them. So we're going to go ahead and create a smile, just because that's an easy one to start with. And we're going to just use sculpting to do it, and use a move brush. No move brush? What's it called? Grab. Oh, that's smoothing. Going grabbing. Where is the radius? There it is. And you can see how we can easily do this, but it's doing both sides. We're not going to want to do both sides here. This is a situation where we're going to do one side and then the other one's going to be separate. So we need to turn off the automatic mirroring. Now, where is symmetry? There it is. So now we turn it off. There we are. So there are a couple of tools we can use to try and help us do this. I'm using the grab, but the problem with the grab is that you can see how it grabs the wrong amount. I've got a couple of options. I can either use a twist or I can change this curve to be a little bit more realistic. Either one of these things will work. I think I'm going to start with this, just nudge it like this. And I want to narrow the lips just a touch like that. And you can overdo these expressions. I mean, you should overdo them because you're only going to be using them as a percentage. You're not going to be putting the whole thing on all the time. So it's fine if you get like a Joker grin. And what we would really like to have is a nice crease running down here. And unfortunately, we don't have the sculpting tools that we would have in ZBrush. So I can't do the SD brush. But I can use this pinch here. Unfortunately, I can't see where the crease is. Yeah, there should be a crease right here, but the crease brush isn't really creating it, is it? Maybe this doesn't work the way I thought it did. Is there an alternate to that brush? Here's the crease. Maybe I was just using the wrong one. Ah, there we are. That's what I wanted to see. All right, so we now have a smile, and as you can see, it's nothing special. It draws the nose a little bit, which is fine. And what we're going to want to do is just duplicate this. which I believe you do by right-clicking on one of these grayed out buttons. New shape from mix, duplicate. There's no duplicate. I have to engage it, do a new shape from mix, and then flip this one. There we go. And we're calling that E-Smile right, and this one's E-Smile left. Or maybe we should put it the other way around. E-L-Smile and E-R-Smile. And if we put both of them on at once, you can see how creepy that looks, because it's not really intended to be put on all at once. It's intended to be like 50%, 50%, something like this, you know. But this is just half-assing it. So what I really wanted to look at were the lips, and you can see how the lips don't feel right at all. They don't pull back properly. They don't work correctly. These are the problems we're going to have creating the expressions for these characters. We're going to need to be a lot more careful to get the expressions to work with the kind of visuals that we actually have. So is it Alt to bring them down? I think it is. Or is it Control? It's Control, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So if we just do a little bit of deflating on these lips, and then we grab them and pull them back a little bit. Let's bring this back into being a... This feels wrong. There's something wrong with how I've grabbed it. This always happens when I try and redo something that I've done before and I screw it up and I fail. There's always some dumb thing that I screw up. It always works like that. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Undo. There we are. Oh. Well, that was weird. Apparently, Mirror from Topology actually creates the mirror and then deletes the original, so that's two separate undo steps. Fascinating. That still looks like he's about to try and sell a mask to Link. But the good news is that the keys are not so screwed up anymore. We still have a very, very sharp point on the lips. As you can see how we get this kind of Jack Nicholson lip movement. Let's go ahead and try it again. This time I'm going to pull out my art tools rather than trying to use a mouse for this, because I don't think the mouse was helping much. So if I use my art tools, I can much more freely control what's going on, except for I've got myself into the ZBrush motion. How do I... Oh, it's middle click. That's a pain in the ass. God damn it. The problem is I actually don't have middle click assigned to any of my keys. So I can't change the camera angle on this easily anymore. I have to rebind the keys so that they work. Yeah, that's not going to work. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'll have to do it off screen sometime. How exciting! Everybody gets to watch me just fart around and screw things up repeatedly. But if we want to take a look at that, we can just mirror the shape key and then undo it, and then we can get both sides at the same time. And you can see how that's really creepy. But if we bring it like this, it's not so bad. Now, the question is, if we make the lips thicker and thinner, does it still work? And this is something where I worked at this quite a bit before. And they're actually not too bad in this case. But what we're going to see is a lot of damage at the edge of the mouth. So you can see here right there, we've got an extra line around the lower lip. You see that problem there? Also, these thick lips are not, we're not going to want to have just a thick lip modifier. That's something that doesn't really make sense. But because of the way we've built these thick lips, they've got an extra little swell at the edge of the outer part of the lip. And that's something that exists, but it's something that fights what we're trying to do with our animations. And then here, this version is going to loop under, and then the things that loop under are going to get screwed up. So it's a little bit difficult for us to try and figure out what these should actually be like, because all of these shape keys kind of fight. That looks like Spider-Man from Spider-Man 3. Now he's going to dance down the street. So what we're going to do is stop with all of this for the day and work on some unimportant, but some unartistic stuff. So we're going to go ahead and save that. We're going to go back over here. It's going to error out. These are going to vanish. Yeah, there they are. And we're going to just drop the same materials that we were using on them again. There we go. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a Photoshop. These characters, as you can see, they sort of end. And that's not because I have a different body mesh that I plan to use. It's because these characters are actually going to be not ever in the same game world. They're going to just get shot, you know, beauty shot style, to show you their portraits as they're talking. And they'll be in the same scene in that they're 3D objects and that they'll be animated and so on and so forth. But you're never going to like see them in the same space as the ship. And so you can sort of think of them as being inside of a box getting their photos taken. I might put up different backgrounds, but I don't think so. It's really just going to be like this. I'll add in hair and, you know, jumpsuit collars and stuff, but this is the basic idea. And so we're going to build the part where they actually get photographed, where they actually get to take their picture. And to do that, we're going to need a tool. So we're going to go ahead and not copy, just create empty. Yeah, I knew you were going to do that. I shrunk it, I got rid of it, I told it not to do that in the head, and then it still did it in the head. It happens. There we are. So we're going to go ahead and call this a photo booth. I'm going to drop it in at 0, 0, 0. There we go. And one of the things we have to realize is that this is the point at which the camera will orbit the head. So when we drop the head into the photo booth and we drop the camera into the photo booth, the camera is actually going to be linked to an object at 0, 0, 0, which we're going to call the camera arm. And then we'll drop the main camera into that camera arm. And we're going to bring this main camera just to a flat position. Nope, that's not what I want. A flat position so that it can be modified more cleanly. So if we do this, then the camera is straight on, as you can see. And then the camera arm is what we end up manipulating. So if we go over here and we actually do some spinning things, you can see how that's not spinning. This is spinning. You can see how it keeps the head in the center of the frame because the orbit point of this face is the center of the head. Fun fact, though, we don't want it to be the center of the head. We actually want it to be the face, a little bit forward, because that way, when we orbit around to the side, like this, the front of the face will still be mostly in the center of the frame rather than the ear being in the center of the frame. And that's going to be an important thing for us in terms of taking pictures. So let's just set this up as a 30-degree picture for the sake of the test here, or maybe a negative 30. And what we want to do is we want to paint to a texture, a render target. So we're just going to go ahead and create one here. No, that's not what I want. Creating a render texture. There it is. And we can set this to be whatever size we want. It'll auto scale however we want it to look. And we're going to just put that in to our main camera here as a render target. There we are. Oh no, there's no textures. That's because it's down here in the render texture, see? So if we take a look at this render texture, we see exactly what we were seeing, except for it's square now, because that's how it was. The problem is I can't select the render texture and the object over here at the same time in the exact same way. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop open the render texture down here. No. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and lock that. And then we can select the camera arm and do the manipulation. And you can watch it not change at all. That's interesting. Oh, it's because we weren't in play mode, perhaps? There are compiler errors, apparently. That's interesting. Yeah, so you can see how this is something which isn't updating properly, but it is updating whenever the problem is that the chain of dirty checks is not working properly. This window is not being told that it updated, and therefore it isn't really properly showing when it's updating, but it is. Every frame we're getting a different image onto this render texture, and that's going to be the render texture that we use for the character portraits. The only problem being that this main camera is actually a little bit too far away. Let's bring it down to 2 and see whether that's too close. That might be a little too close. Let's say 2.3. That's probably about right. So now that we have the structure set up, we can go ahead and do some work on making this into something we can use. The problem being that we have apparently some bugs that need fixing. I don't remember writing any bugs. The pre-integrated skin shader? The pre-integrated skin shader is preventing me from running the game. Because one of the skin shaders has a bug? Well, I guess that solves that. We're not going to be using the pre-integrated skin shader. Deleted. If anybody has a favorite skin shader that actually doesn't completely crash a project, let me know. I am interested. I'd like a skin shader that doesn't suck. And that one, I'm not sure if it sucked or not. It came highly recommended, but I don't know enough about skin shaders to actually tell you whether or not that one was any good. What I do know is that I need to drop in some textures here, just to make it look a little bit less silly. There we are. Did that not take? I guess. So what we have now is a situation where I can enter play mode. Huzzah! But we can't see anything because there is no camera. So just so that we can see what the heck's going on, we're going to go ahead and put in a UI. There we go. How about a panel? And rather than the panel being full size, we're going to drop it in the middle of the screen, and we're going to make it 256 by 256. And then we're just going to add in a raw image. And that's going to be our render texture. Diplop. And that's going to just map like this. So now when we look at this entire thing, you can now see what it looks like in the middle of the screen during gameplay. And it says display 1, no cameras rendering, because it's a pain in the ass. So we'll just create a camera just to get it to stop whining. And then we'll turn the camera off. There we are. And make sure this camera is somewhere off in the middle of nowhere like that, so we don't have to look at it. There we are. Because we're going to have a real camera in the actual game. The actual game is going to have a ship in the screen, and this is just going to be an object in the ship. Now the question is, I think 256 is probably too big. So if we were to bring this render texture down, so let's say 128 by 128, if we bring this down in size, like this, we'll actually get a 128 by 128 render of this character. Now you can see that what we've got for the camera setup is a little bit wonky because it is being told to put in a solid flat black background, and it is not doing it. It is instead putting in a gray background. I don't know why that is. Oh, it's because it was a transparent background. Sort of. There. That's better. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of fun with this, and we're going to put in a backdrop that will just, pretend that this backdrop is something which will help to punch up the character. So it'll be a cube. Come on. There we are. It's inside the camera arm, if you can see that. Now the point of that is that the cube, which will make, like this, the cube will add in a cut that will look halfway decent. And the way it's going to do that is it's going to be up like this. And that sort of cuts puts a cut right there. And I mean, I could do this however I want. What we're going to do in the long run is we're going to have each character have a custom setup, right? That's the whole point. But with this in mind, what we can do now is however we move it, that 3D object in the background remains in the background, and we cast a shadow onto it. See? Now, one of the things about this is that our light sources are not tied to our camera. So if we drop them into the same camera arm, now everything about this swivels when we move our camera, and the only change is where the character is. The actual shadows and stuff are all based on where the camera is looking, so we always get a really sharp visual, but that's not what we want. I just did it, but it's not what we want. We want to have several cameras that are fixed, several light sources that are fixed. So we've got a main light source, and then we're just going to delete this other face. We've got the main light source, and we've got the rim light, and those are camera based, right? But we also are going to want a face light. So in here in the photo booth, we're going to create one more one more light. It's going to be a spotlight, and it's not tied to the camera arm. It's independent of the camera arm because it's going to light the face specifically, like this. And when we've got it set up like this, we shouldn't have any problem seeing it. You can see how bright that is. Well, what's really the problem here is that these are too bright. So we're going to bring these down. I'm going to take this down to 0.5, and we're going to take this down to, I guess 0.3 is fine because it's coming the other direction. And then this spotlight, these actually all need to be spotlights. And the reason for that is because otherwise they will light up the ship. Unless they're on their own layer. So we'll just make them on their own layer. Yeah, of course. They'll just be on their own layer. So we're not going to worry about it. This is going to be a directional light rather than a spotlight. And you can see how much brighter that is. It's ridiculously bright, right? But if we go ahead and we set it up like this, let's just bring this render texture back up to 256 so that we can see what the fring we're doing. There we go. And now if we move the camera arm around, the idea here is that we'll always be able to see the face without it being ever in shadow, but we also have the lights from our camera lighting up the surface of whatever we're looking at. The only problem I have with this is that the backdrop, this cube, is so bright that it's really drowning out everything. So we're just going to use a different material for that. Why don't we drop in the hull material? Boom. That's still pretty bright. Let's drop in a shadow material. Is that too dark? That might be too dark. Ship hull. That's about right. We can fuss with it later. I can even create my own now that I'm thinking about it. Let's go ahead and use Deco. Yay, Deco. And then what we'll do is we'll just create a new material because those are all crap. Photo backdrop. And we will go ahead and drop that in as our cube material. And then we'll just modify it by bringing down the albedo, like so, and bringing down the smoothness. That's still a little bright. There we are. Now this character is actually, you might remember, medium dark. It's not a very bright, it's not a very pale character. So the fact that it looks Caucasian is a little bit due to overlighting. If we were to drop in the actual Caucasian skin that I made, you can see how that's like ghost pale. So what we need to do is adjust the lighting until these look how I want them to look. And I'll have to do this if I change shaders later on. Again, hooray! Great, right? So just testing a couple of small little things here. Yeah, I guess that's what I'll have to use. Either way, what we're going to do is we're going to bring all of these lights down another notch. So that'll be 0.3, and then this will be 0.3. Yeah, that's probably about right. And then you can see the rim light is just about right already, so that's fine. This spotlight is white, and I think that's fine. Yeah, that's probably good. It's going to be the primary light source on the backdrop when you're looking straight at it. So this camera's FOV is really aggressive. Let's go ahead and bring the camera's FOV to something a little more forgiving. I think that if we pull the camera's FOV out to 90 and then bring the camera in, it will give us a worse result. So we're going to want to bring it to maybe 15 and then bring the camera way out. Well, maybe that's a little bit too much. Let's try 22. And the reason I'm doing this is because otherwise the shape of the face gets distorted. We're used to seeing faces that are a specific shape with a specific lens distortion, and I'm just sort of half-assed it, trying to make it so that the lens, it doesn't distort the face from what I consider to be a normal-looking face. We're going to have plenty of other things that distort the face. We don't need the lens to help. Yeah, so this is good in terms of the overall setup. This is how I want it. Obviously, this person is hairless and naked, but when I think about how the hair is going to get put in and the stuff here, you might think that this is too far, too much white space, but there's going to be text over here. Or, you know, if it's pointed the other way, well, that's the x-axis. Yoink. There's going to be text over here. So I don't want there to be too little white space. That might be a little bit too much, though. It might still be a little bit. Let's go ahead and put it at like 0.15. There we are. That's a good balance, I think. All right. So now what we've got is a photo booth where we can set this camera up with a random rotation within various parameters. And that will allow us to quickly set up an exact feel for the character. Because a lot of how a character feels is the camera angles they're shown at. So when we pick a camera angle, it's largely going to be about how head-on they are versus how sideways they are, and how above or below we are, because those are things that are going to change how we feel about the character. Now the eyes are probably going to track the camera most of the time. It's a little bit hard for me to show that just because of the fact that these are not quite set up right at the moment. But those are positioned. You bet your bibby those aren't set up right. So, you know, what we'll have is a living character. I don't know whether they're going to be fully animated or whether it's going to be still shots. This photo booth setup allows for either or. It should work okay. Only problem with it is that we got more than one character on screen at the same time, then their light rigs are going to overlap because we're using area lights. We're not using spotlights. We're using lights that affect the entire universe, and that might be something that we have to switch. We might have to switch over to using spotlights, but spotlights are so their fade off is so aggressive in Unity. There's no such thing as a proper area light. Not with the default setup anyway. So that means that if I were going to use something besides a nice vectored light, I'm going to have to be very careful about how I light the characters. Another thing that I'm going to have to change is, depending on the color of the skin, I'm going to have to light it differently and change the material's shininess and a couple of other details like that. It's not something that I'm very good at, but it's something that has to be done. If we were to drop in the... oh, that's S2? That's fine. So you can see how, although the color difference is actually quite striking here, you can see how it's like pink versus tan, right? It's very noticeable. But dropping them into the material, it's only a small difference in terms of how it feels. And a lot of that is due to the ambient lighting that I added back in. So let's go ahead and take that ambient lighting out and just see how it feels. So if we pop on over into the lighting settings and turn that ambient light back off, you can see how it's a radically different result. So I think that having some ambient lighting is good. 1 is probably too much. Let's try 0.5. So you might think that that's too dark, and you're right, but what we're going to punch up are these lights. And these lights can be adjusted independently of the background, obviously. So there. Now what we've got is a brighter skin for this particular character. If we drop this pale character back in, you can see how pale they look. We can adjust these lights as we see fit. The other option is that we can have the same lighting rig and we can reduce the actual skin spectrum in terms of how dark you can go. Now it's tempting to say that you shouldn't do that because you have people who are very dark or very pale, right? So you shouldn't reduce that variability. But if you're adjusting the lighting rig anyway, you're basically adjusting the colors. So the key here isn't to have the maximum possible skin tones as known by the variable on the skin material. The idea here is to get a good variety of skin tones in the game as it is perceived. And one way to chase that is to have a lighting rig that works for a reduced number of skin tones, but allow those skin tones to look fully variable because they're reweighted correctly. And as an easy kind of half-assed example of that, if I were to drop the medium tone back in here and then I were to drop this down to a darker color, I'm not saying that this is a decent skin for this, but one of the things you can do to make darker characters look a little bit more realistic is not about the actual value that you set here as much as the other settings that you use to try and make the skin feel realistic. And that's hard to do with the default Unity shader because the default Unity shader doesn't have the right skin reflectiveness values. And that's a real problem. One of the reasons I wanted to use oh, you know what? It does. It has a metallicity value. I might be able to do it. Let's take a quick look. So I've got a couple of things here you can see. These are specifically made for the other skin value, the other skin shader, and they've got a bunch of different things. For example, this is the occlusion for them, and you can set it to darker or lighter as you see fit. The wrong occlusion mask. It looks like the occlusion mask is. Why is the occlusion mask wrong? There we are. I must have just picked up the wrong one there. And that helps a lot, but what we really want to do is set up the metallicity map. And one of these is the metallicity map. Here it is, gloss. So if we drop that in, it might be inverted. Because the idea here is you want people's noses to be shinier than the rest of their heads. But it doesn't appear to be having any sort of value change here. If we go over into scene view, we can look at it more closely. So one of the things is that this metallicity map, which you can see here, you can see how the lips are whiter, but I actually don't know if that's being, is it like from grayscale? Oh, that's not what I want. It's from, there we are. It's the other thing is from grayscale. There we are. Revert. See this metallic alpha, albedo alpha. So I think it's asking for an alpha. So rather than, brightness and darkness, it's looking for an alpha value. Well, if I take this gloss and I duplicate it, I can change the alpha source to from grayscale, and then hit apply, and let's see. It doesn't look like it has generate alpha from image gray. This doesn't look like it has an alpha. It doesn't seem to have... click here, maybe? So let's go ahead and take a look and see whether or not that will give us the right metallicity values here. So if we take a look, that is not quite right. I think it might be inverted because the nose has a strange pattern on it. You can see that. The problem is we're using a metallicity mask, and that's not what we want. We want a smoothness mask. So let's go ahead and take this metallicity mask out here and put it in as roughness instead. All right, so if we take the metallicity and we just alter it, that's fine. We don't care about that. This roughness mask is inverted, I think. Let's drop in the depth and see what happens here. All right, so clearly the black is shiny and the white is not shiny because these are the ears and they are the white parts here. So if we were going to do this using a roughness map, we would want to invert the gloss map that we've been using. For now, we're not going to bother. We're going to go ahead and leave it as is. But I'm kind of mapping out, trying to figure out how I'm going to make a skin setup. And it looks like this, I can do it. I just don't know whether it's going to be any good. Tough to say. If you have any advice, let me know. What we're going to do now is bring the color back up to full paleness, and you can just see how pale that looks, even though it's not the Caucasian character. Because it's all just a matter of what your eye is perceiving. Regardless of the actual colors of the skin texture, you can adjust the hell out of them using lighting. And that's what I was talking about. If it's all about lighting, the question becomes, I forgot to actually check. I did all that work and then I forgot to check. The point is, when you have a darker character and you want to punch up this darker character, the skin reacts differently to light. And we're used to seeing darker characters with more light, more ambient light in the scenes, because that's how you film darker actors. And that means that in order to do that, I would need to up the amount of lighting on the characters and have their skin reflectiveness work out correctly. Or I could just change their skin reflectiveness. So that means that I could adjust the roughness value based on your skin tone rather than changing the light setup. And that's sort of cheat. I'm going to try and get away with. Either way, this is a rig that works. Once I've got the rig set up for a character, I can stream this 256 by 256 or 128 by 128 output texture wherever I need it. I can turn the rig on and off as I need. I can freeze or play as I need. But the real thing is I have to be able to control this face, not only to set it up as a specific character, but also to have that specific character make various expressions and animate. And these are things I can do just on the fly right here. So, for example, if I wanted to, I could... And it doesn't have to be great, but it does have to be understandable. The problem, of course, being that at the moment, I don't have any decent animations planned out. All I've got is a bunch of test crap that doesn't really work because it's ancient. So what we're going to have to do is build this entire thing from the ground up. Oh, so exciting! I have some scripts for it. I don't know whether I actually imported them, but I can make them again or import them. Either way, it works fine. Basically, the scripts exist to create random shapes, saving and loading them from files or from streams of text, whatever, which would allow me to allow various characters to be saved and loaded, and maybe I could create something where you can tweak the characters and stuff like that. But there are a lot of things missing. For example, there's no facial expressions, and all the morphs are terrible. So these are things where I have to wonder how much of this do I want to do on stream, and how much of this do I want to do off stream, and then present as a fait accompli. So I don't know. We'll have to if you have an opinion, let me know. Either way, this is something that I can put into the final, the actual scene. All I have to do is integrate it properly. So this photo booth object is something where we have to be able to spawn it and then stream the visual, whatever it happens to be, as a character object. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create a new scene. A new script, my bad, which will stream a character's expressions. So we'll just pop this up, grind. There we are. It's going to be in namespace crew. I think it's namespace crew. Yeah, I think so. And it's going to barf for some reason. Why are you barfing? What the fuck are you talking about? Why did you open up post? Did I click on post? I did. I don't know what's going on. This thing always malfunctions until I select another file. So that's fine. It works now. So what we're going to need is a public transform head, public transform camera arm, and we can work out the camera if we want later on, but we do need to know what it is. So public camera. We're going to need to have a public render texture, but we're going to want to be able to create one. And this is something that we'll just have to program. We'll use it this way. So if render texture, if there's no render texture, then create one, obviously, right? Render texture equals new render texture. And basically we need to determine how large it's going to be. And we want to make it so that it has definable characteristics. So that's what we'll do. Public int width equals 256 and height equals 256. And then we'll put that in right here. Render texture, width, height. I don't know about depth. There is something about this where it actually malfunctions if you choose the wrong depth number. And I think that I need it to be 24 deep due to having a stencil buffer. Because if it is a semi-transparent material, like say the eyeballs, I've had it render wrong so many times, you know. So return RT. Here in start, we're going to go ahead and say camera.renderTarget. Target display, target texture, there it is, equals RT. And that's really all we need to do to set this up. Here in update, we'll just get rid of it. Boop, gone. So this is good enough for us to get our photo booth running, but there are a couple of things that we're going to want to work out. So you can see how this is public camera, and it's got this green underline. That's because there is an archaic, obsolete thing built into Unity, and we're going to want to override it. There we are. Anyway, we are going to want to be able to keep track of the character involved. So public crew member, is that what it is? It's crew member. Public crew member. And that's going to be something where to do, make this matter. But we're going to want to keep a list of all active photo booths. So we'll just go ahead and make that now. Public static list photo booths equals new list photo booth. And then down here in start, we'll add ourselves to it. Booths.add this. And then when we are deleting ourselves, so void on destroy booths.remove this. And what we're going to want to do is create some static functions to help us access stuff. Public static photo booth 4, and then character crew member crew. And then we just go through them for each booths as for each photo booth in booths. If booth dot crew member equals crew, then return booth, return null. And what that'll do is it'll return the active booth for the character if there is one. Public static render texture, photo, crew member, crew. Same deal. We're just going to go ahead and grab the booth and then grab the photo. And so what we're going to do for that is we're going to say photo booth, come on, booth equals photo booth 4 crew. If booth equals null, return null. I can actually just say this because it's a mono behavior. Otherwise, we're going to say return booth.rt. There we go. That way we'll be able to use a crew member as an anchor. Now, the thing is that we currently don't have any method of creating photo booths for characters because the photo booths exist as a kind of theoretical thing. What we're going to need to do is add to the universe a photo booth. And then the universe can spawn in the photo booth and then right over the mesh, the head mesh, with a set of parameters for the character. But that can wait. For now, this is enough. And it will allow us to have our characters get photographed. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this photo booth. We're going to add the photo booth to the photo booth. There we go. We're going to set these up properly. Doop. And doop. And doop. And we don't have a crew member yet. And the render texture, what we've got is a couple of options, and I think the easiest option for us is to just delete this one. Boom, it's gone. And that's going to cause an error in the UI, but that's fine because the UI is not important. And now this camera is filming the real character. If we turn off the other camera, doop, doop, it says no camera is rendering. That's interesting. Is that because this camera still thinks it has a, missing rather than none? There we go. So now, as you can see, it works fine. And just in case she's been accused of any crimes, we're protecting her identity. That's not part of this. We'll just turn that off. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to save this photo booth as a prefab. I guess we'll just save it right here in the main prefabs directory. And then we're going to pop on over. I'll save this whole setup. So let's turn this canvas back on. And we'll turn this camera back on. And then we're going to hit play. I'm going to pause it. This should now have a render texture with a face. Perfect. Perfect. It's all working great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go over into the test mission, which is here. This is our ship, and you can see how we've got some crew members set up, but there's no photo booths for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to create photo booths for them. Now the problem with this is that for now, each photo booth has overlapping lights, and I forgot about that, even though I warned myself not to. So we're going to drop in a photo booth. There it is. The photo booths do not have to be at 0, 0, 0, so we're going to move them off to like 1,000. There we go. And we're just going to go up here, and we're going to duplicate it, and just see whether or not the lights explode violently. It doesn't look like they actually do. Oh, they definitely do. Okay, so these lights all have to be changed into spotlights rather than directional lights. We don't have a choice. Boom. Now the problem with that is that they're going to be really pretty dark. So let's go ahead and save this. Saved. And if we take a look at the camera here, you can see how it looks completely different than what we might want it to look like. So in order to make this work out, we're going to have to redo the lights. Now, this world has cameras of its own, has light sources of its own, and it has different lighting settings. So let's go ahead and set some of these up again. The environment lighting is currently at 0, which means we are going to have pretty stark shadows. However, the ship looks best at 0 intensity for the indirect lighting, so I'll leave it like that, and I'll just adjust the spotlights so that they make sense. We've got one directional light, and you can see that it is not even pointing at the face. And that's because the positioning of these is not correct. So we're just going to drop it into 0, 0, 0, and then 0, 0, 0. And we're going to set this up so that it's something we can actually use like this. Now, we don't actually want it to be straight on from the camera because that would make it kind of against the point. So we're going to move it to the side and then tilt it like this. And I think that that's still targeting pretty good. There we are. And we're going to want to just punch up the range or the intensity because the intensity is pretty low right now. Let's turn off the other two for a minute and take a look. We're going to delete these two photo booths. And then we're taking a look at the camera here. And that's how that light looks. So that's fine. Let's turn it off. But that's not how that light looks, because what we've got there is the primary light. So what we really want to have here is we don't want to have it with the main light. So we're going to just have a new layer, and we need to create a new layer here. Add layer. Call it the photo booth layer. And the photo booth layer is going to be this. And we're just going to switch everything in here over to the photo booth layer. And this camera will only view the photo booth layer. So, culling mask, nothing, photo booth. But you can see how that light is still affecting us. Well, we're going to have to take that directional light and tell it to stop affecting the photo booth layer. I think that there's another light. Maybe not. So you can see now that there's no light. It's very dark. And that's how we want this to look. If we take a look here, we can see it up close and personal because this camera has dominance. So when we turn the directional light back on, you can see how faint that is. That's the problem with these point lights. They are not really very bright. So what we're going to do is we are going to extend the range to 15 or even 30. And that'll brighten it up, but you can see how directed and focused it is. We can change the spot angle, but that's not going to change the vector of the light coming in. Still, I think it's probably fine if it's like this. That's not too bad. I think that it's too close, so let's pull it back a little bit. Center it on the face again, and punch up the intensity to 2. All right, so that's not too bad. Let me turn this light on. This light is dead on onto the face, like so. We're going to adjust it so that it's not straight like that. We're going to bring it so it's a little bit down. And then we're going to turn off this original light and take a look at this one. And you can see how that's barely at all even visible. So we're going to just punch it up until it makes sense for us. That's not what I wanted to do. So if we widen it and then up the range to 15, that'll give us a nice little bit of face highlight. And if we turn these both on at the same time, it's very bright. So we're going to just reduce this down to maybe 1.5 or 1. 1's good. And then we can just bring in the rim light. Now the rim light needs to be completely adjusted from scratch because it's not even close to being in the right spot. So we'll just adjust it until it is. There we go, like this. Like that. And we're just going to punch that intensity way up. And you can see that that is pulling a little bit of a light off of the back end there. If we increase the intensity, you can see how it pops it. So we're going to bring that up to maybe 2. That's probably about right. I guess we're going to try increasing these a little bit. Yeah, that's more like what I had in mind. Now if we move the camera arm around, how does the lighting change? It's not too bad. This is supposed to be a mid-skin tone character, and that feels roughly right. Now if we go over into the materials and we switch it over to a Caucasian character, Yeah, okay, so that's roughly right. We can adjust this however we want later, but the big problem is we don't have any fill lights. So this is going to give us a fairly stark look. That might be okay, though. In terms of sci-fi, stark-looking crew quarters are actually pretty common. I can always put in more lights as fill lights if I need to, but for now I think this is fine. I'm not too concerned. Mifaz says restart OmniSharp, restart OmniSharp. F1, restart OmniSharp. Okay. Presumably that would have fixed whatever the problem was ages ago. I bet he was right on time with that remark, and I was just an hour slow noticing. So now what we've got is a setup where this photo booth uses these lights here. You can see the ranges of the lights involved. And the camera, we're going to go ahead and reduce that draw distance. We do not need it anywhere near that long of a draw distance. So we're going to save that photo booth, apply. Now we can duplicate that photo booth and move it to each side. We're going to want to put enough space that the lights don't intersect. It doesn't really matter at this stage, but you know. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the camera arms so that we get different photos and we can tell which one is which, just for the sake of having them look different, right? Now, here's the thing. When I hit play, they're not going to show up because they are all rendering into render textures. What we really need to do is set them up so that the render textures call for these photo booths. And that requires us to pull the crew list into those characters. So if we go down into the tortoise here, here is the crew booth right here. If we look at the game, you can see how it's just a little bit off the bottom of the screen. We're probably going to want to move the camera just a touch so that we can actually see it. There we go, something like that. Anyway, the crew is in there. So we're going to grab that and we're going to open it up and we're going to drop these three characters into the three photo booths we created. So just grab the photo booth and drop in an Alice. They're all going to look strangely similar for the moment. And then drop in a Bob. And then drop in a George. Where's my George? There's my George. All right, so now we've got ourselves three generic characters. The photo booths are set up. All we have to do is tell the game that these three tiles need to be the images from those photo booths. Now, to do that, all we have to do is set up the crew member UI to ask for them. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So if we actually select those, there we go. This is Notum. This is the task UI list. We want this one over here. The crew UI list. There it is. You can see that the crew UI list has targets and it has a UI binder set up. But what it doesn't have is a portrait. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a portrait for these characters. The UI binder here is pointed at the crew, not at the crew member UI. So what we actually need to do is make it so that the crew has a portrait. And that's exactly what we're going to do. It's similar. It's much easier than you might think. We've already set it up. All we have to do is say public, what is it, just a texture 2D? Or I guess it's going to be a render texture every time, so I might as well make it a render texture. Public render texture portrait. Like so. And then we're going to set that up as a getter and a setter. And that's going to get it from the photo booth. Photo booth, return photo booth.portrait. That's not how you spell it. Photo booth.portrait. Photo. Yeah, there it is. And then we're going to pass it the crew member. And that should be enough to have that work. The only question is whether or not this is going to work out. The UI binder might not be clever enough to understand what a render texture is. It's not a terribly clever tool. We'll go ahead and try it though. Ah, there, it worked fine. So that's working. So in case you're wondering what my end goal was, you're looking at it. I don't know what's going on with these things randomly screwing up. I do know, I lied, I know exactly what's going on. The camera is marked as a main. So this is not the main camera, this is photo booth cam. And it is absolutely not the main character. And we're just going to apply, and that should change it for all of them. So now we're going to try again, and hopefully the lasers will point to the ship. Yay, look at that, perfect. Now these textures are very, very small right here because this UI is crap. We haven't built the UI to actually work right now. But we have portrait textures, and that means that we are most of the way towards being able to create proper UI. Oh, wow, my mic is way out of position. Whoop, let's move it. There we are. I hope you could have heard me for the past hour. I guess you probably can. Either way, we now have these textures popping up, and if we were to move the photo booth around, you can see them reflected right there in Bob. Bob, how you doing? I'm doing okay, everybody. Hey, George. George, up here, George. Hmm? No, up here. Oh, hey. So now we can do this as we please. Here's the fun thing, though. If we take the photo booth and we turn it off, everything still works because the render texture is rendered. It's done. Which means that these photo booths are not something that has to stay on all the time. Now, if we were to take this camera arm and move it, nothing will happen because there's no camera attached anymore. The camera has been turned off. And that means that we can have 100 of these. And we can either turn them off or we can switch them in and out, whichever one we prefer. Switching them in and out is a little bit better because otherwise you might have 100 skinned meshes hiding off screen somewhere. It's not as heavy as you might think when they're mostly turned off, though, so I'll decide later on. Either way, the point here is that these photo booths don't have to constantly film, and that is a really important feature here. It means that we can do this without overly taxing the computer. It means that we can do it on mobile. I doubt this will ever be a mobile game, but this is a technique you can use in a mobile game. And basically all you do is you load up one NPC, one crew member per frame, and you take one shot and you fill the next one in the next frame. Because all you're doing is adjusting certain values and swapping out a material. And so it's just like bang, 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 once per frame, and it's very, very lightweight. So it's a great way to do this on a mobile game. We're not aiming for mobile, but it's a good thing to keep in mind. Wow, they're getting pretty tired. Yeah. I have to think about the best way to do UI for this because I don't know. I need to think of a really good visual for this. Right now we're playing it at a speed that's ridiculously high. But at a normal speed, I would want these to actually have the crew members in them. And I don't really know a good way to do that because it could have any number of crew members, so I could make them continue to grow, but that gets untenable as if you get like 15 people and they're doing 10 different tasks, it's going to fly off the top of the screen and you're not going to be able to read it. So I have to think about that. Either way, I've been doing this for an hour and a half, and I guess it's time for me to stop. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'm sorry that I really didn't get very much done. And maybe I will see you on Saturday if you care to stop by. You got any last-minute questions? Feel free to ask. I'm just going to delete the YouTube video I created because I don't want anybody to keep coming by here. Delete. Deleted. And I'll take a screenshot just because that's always fun. So let's go over into here. Nope, that's Google search. That's the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. There we go. And now we'll just take some screenshots. Placeholders for crew animated portraits in. And then we'll go on over into these photo booths. Poof, there they are. They will not all be generic placeholder folks when I actually get going. Indie Dev. All right, well, Thanks for hanging out, everybody. See you around. Have a good one. Where is my stop button?